Hi, welcome to our second panel reading from Unquiet Spirits, and welcome to Women in Horror Month. Women in Horror Month is an international grassroots initiative which encourages supporters to learn about and showcase the underrepresented work of women in the horror industries. This inclusive and positive movement is open to everyone, just as we believe the horror genre should be. As I said last week, but it bears repeating, no discussion of contributions to the genre would be complete without including the recently released Unquiet Spirits. I gave it a well-deserved rave review and Hell Notes. And as you know, I love ghost stories, I love demon stories, but Unquiet Spirits is so much more than that. The stories are gorgeous sketches that are a discussion between the author, her past self, her understanding of her culture, and her role in her family. Unquiet Spirits is an important book, and I found it to be an intimate and emotional read. What I loved a lot about the book is that it provides voice and agency to the mothers and the grandmothers who have stories that must be told, but were never permitted to tell them. And that way, it's a perfect fit for Women in Horror Month. Just to wet your whistles, allow me to read the blurb from Unquiet Spirits. From hungry ghosts, vampiric babies, and shape-shifting fox spirits to the avenging white lady of urban legend, for generations, Asian women's roles have been shaped and defined through myth and story. In Unquiet Spirits, Asian writers of horror reflect on the impact of superstition, spirits, and the supernatural in this unique collection of 21 personal essays exploring themes of otherness, identity, expectation, duty, and loss, leading ultimately to understanding and empowerment. Allow me now to introduce our first author. Kiyomi Appleton Gaines is a writer of fairy tales and other fantastical things. She was a 2018 contributing editor at Enchanted Conversation and contributor to Mad Scientist Journal 2019 Spring Quarterly. Her work has also appeared in Nightmare Magazine, Quail Bell Magazine, and The Grim Reaper. Kiyomi is a third-generation Asian American of Japanese descent. She lives in Bend with her husband and 2 marmalade cats. And as she's reading, I'm going to put up how you can follow her in the banner that is beneath her. So Kiyomi, please take it away.
Well, hello. In the time when I was thinking about writing this essay and I was sort of approaching this moment of now or never when it came to being a mother. I was already well into what doctors so kindly refer to as geriatric maternal age. And it felt like something I could no longer pull off or could no longer put off to one day, maybe. It seemed like everyone around me was either expecting or trying or having those conversations about when or raising their children. And I settled on not now. And so that became never. And it was really hard and isolating. I had a lot of complicated feelings about it that no one else seemed to be talking about, especially as every message we get about womanhood also assumes motherhood. I saw an article around the same time about how COVID had impacted women harder than men. And from the first paragraph, it was all about childcare. They didn't mean women, they meant mothers. But those two words are so often seen as interchangeable. So I was left with this question of what does it mean to be a woman fully who has no children? Just a little bit of background. Yama-uba is a mountain oni, which is a kind of ancestral spirit often tied to place. With the advent of Buddhism, the oni, who had been seen as sometimes helpful and sometimes hindering, but generally neutral, came to be defined as evil. And the word is usually translated in English as demon. Yama-uba is a figure akin to and perhaps even folklorically related to Baba Yaga, and her story follows 2 paths. One in which she defies convention and one where she accedes to it. So I'm going to read a selection from my essay in Unquiet Spirits, Plant a Cherry Tree Over My Grave. Later in the story cycle, Yamanba, a variant of Yamauba, transforms from mountain witch to beloved protector. She's welcomed back. No longer a monster, she is beautiful, erotic, and embodies all the feminine virtues. She finds this redemption only in conformity, only through becoming the mother of the folk hero Kintaro. A parent, adjective, readily seen or understood, manifest to the senses. A parent, adjective, having no interest or involvement in parenting, of no parental significance. Witches and non-women notwithstanding, it's still largely an uncharted path. Every woman in my direct line of descent has been a mother. I know only a few women who aren't, and because of the deeply personal reasons behind decisions about reproduction, I have never asked, why? Is this what you wanted or intended? How did you come to your choice? Was it hard? Are you like me? Was it sad for you too? Descendant, noun, a person, plant, or animal originating or coming from an ancestral source. Ancestor, noun, a person from whom one is descended. From the late Latin, antecessor, literally foregoer, derived from Latin antecedere, to go before. When friends announced their impending parenthood, I smiled and cheered, and then I cried for 2 days. Decorating the Christmas tree with the ornaments that my mother sewed while she was pregnant with me, soft and colorful cloth toys, safe for little hands that I always assumed I would one day give to my own child, I cried. I am sorry that I will never bring the love and joy and sense of community to my loved ones that I have experienced with the birth of every child in my circle. I'm sorry my parents won't come, especially to meet the new most important person in our shared world. I'm sorry I won't ever have that special connection with my mother that I've read about. That happens only when a daughter becomes a mother herself. I cried at these and other realizations of things, other assumptions that will never be. It can be surprisingly heartbreaking, letting go of an assumption. When my grandmother died, I felt I'd lost a part of myself, bereft and broken in a way I hadn't anticipated and wasn't prepared for. I had dreams of her for the first couple years after, until she was sure I'd be okay, I suppose. She knew I would be. Kiyomi-chan, she would sing my name. There is evidence that long ago, Mukashi, mountains were regarded as a place of rest, a place for the dead to be buried. In Buddhism, as in many religions, a corpse is impure. The women relegated to the mountain, who tended the mountain, and perhaps the dead, would have borne this impurity and strangeness. In Japan, Buddhism traditionally teaches that a woman should be subject in all things, meek, quiet, industrious, submissive. A woman should submit to her father until married and to her son once widowed. Growing up in a conservative Christian, yet distinctly Japanese household, that Christianity was an Eastern religion long mistranslated and misunderstood was not lost on me, nor the parallel tracks that guided the one good and right way to be a woman. As expectations solidified around ideas of what a woman should be, those whose natures did not conform to such binds were hazarded in predictable ways, forced to suborn until they broke, or died, or fled, or were pushed out. The women in my family are notoriously possessed of a brash, stubborn streak. Forego, verb, to give up the enjoyment or benefit of, to forsake. It is not a default, nor by accident. It is a considered, informed, intentional choice, but not easy. Not for me, anyway. Why am I so sad about not having a baby that I don't want? I don't know, but there it is. What would you say if I told you I wanted a baby? I tell myself I'm joking, feeling hostile. A pause. If you want a baby, we'll have one. I laugh because despite myself knowing yet not knowing quite what I was looking for, it's the right answer. Tell me you love me without telling me you love me. I don't, I say. I'm playing games. I will admit, cringing only later. Kokoro no Oni, the Oni of the heart. Monster. He says, I figured. And that brings with it a question of my very right to feel this way. Who am I, after all, who presumably could have a child if I wanted to, if I weren't actively preventing it, to be sad about the success of my aims? After years of expense and fighting doctors' offices over their haphazard approach to granting my access to birth control, after all that effort, why should I be sad? As legislators continue to tighten restrictions on family planning, the ability to choose not to have a child is becoming as much a point of privilege as the private schools and extracurricular lessons of those who have them. What right do I have to feel sorrow in that? I thought I would be a mother. I chose something different. There's loss in all the selves we decide not to become. Yet this choice, this not becoming, is weightier than others. Perhaps the approximate weight of a pregnancy. I never wanted to be a mother, my mom told me over the years. I never thought I'd be good at it. I think she was good at it, but I also saw how much she gave up in order to be so. My grandmother's picture is in our homes now and on the altar in Japan. Noriko Ryder notes, a popular belief dictates that a religious service should be held for the departed souls of one's ancestors so that these ancestors will protect their descendants. On the other hand, unattended souls are thought to roam in this world to do harm to people as oni. I can see middle age from here, and suddenly what was always a decision of not now, of maybe never, of choosing my own life, the life I could make, will no longer be a choice. It becomes permanent as a baby. I won't have anyone to remember me. Thank you.
Wow. That was so powerful, Kiyomi. I want to reach in and hug you. That was really, and what a timely discussion to be having with all the legislative changes that are going on. Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that, for being so vulnerable with us. Our next author, Grace Chan, was born in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and migrated to Australia with her parents before her first birthday. She grew up in quiet outer suburbia with a bedroom view of bush-covered hills. She can't seem to stop writing about brains, minds, space, technology, ghosts, and identity. Her debut novel, Every Version of You, is about staying in love after mind uploading into virtual reality. Her short fiction can be found in Clark's World, Lightspeed, Fireside Fiction, and many other places. She has been shortlisted for the Aurelius and Norma K. Hemming Awards. So, Grace, it is your turn. Take it away. You're still muted, Grace. Can you unmute the mic?
Thank you so much, Elaine. So, my essay in this collection is called Holy Revelations, and it's a very personal reflection on the role of the Christian mythology and the Christian spirits in my own childhood and adolescence. Originally, when Lee and Angela kindly invited me to contribute something to Unquiet Spirits, my initial reaction was to say no. I felt quite a bit of imposter syndrome and a sense that maybe I wasn't Asian enough or didn't have enough knowledge to write anything for this collection. I guess when I reflected on my personal history, I didn't see the presence of Asian ghosts or folk tales or folk stories in any way. And although I'm sure there may be some in my family's history, there weren't really any that I knew about consciously, or any that were passed down in terms of oral stories to myself. Um, but then as I reflected a little bit further, I thought, oh, I guess there are spirits that really did shape my experience as a child and my family's experience when we migrated from Malaysia to Australia in the late 20th century. And I grew up here in the 90s and the noughties. So yeah, I thought I'd challenge myself to write this essay, and it certainly was an essay that was challenging and also very fulfilling to write. It did take me back to a fair few sort of the experience of growing up in an evangelical church and an evangelical Christian family, and the presence of spirits, in particular, the Holy Spirit, and I guess all the emotions that played into that throughout my childhood and adolescence, very powerful emotions like um, guilt, sin, shame, longing, joy, communion, community, um, the path of what is right versus what is wrong or sinful, duty and filial duty, and duty to a church community. Um, and writing this essay also helped me to reflect on the role of being part of an evangelical Christian community for my family, and also for many other migrant families, many of whom were Malaysian Chinese or Singaporean Chinese, so members of with a long history of migration and diaspora throughout the generations, and then migrating to Australia in the late 20th century, and the role that the church played in terms of community solace, a balm for people's anxieties, feeling of being othered, and a way to I guess find a home in a new and very strange culture, and a way to transition away and maybe deal with the grief and loss of leaving behind many elements of their old homes, their ties, their stories, and their families. So yeah, um, it was certainly a really challenging and personally um, rewarding experience to write this essay. It's might be a little bit of a black sheep in a collection about Asian ghost stories, but I thought, look, if one person reads this and feels seen by my experience, then it will certainly have been worthwhile. So this is Holy Revelations, and I'll read a couple of sections from the start of the essay. He who belongs to God hears what God says. The reason you do not hear is that you do not belong to God. John chapter 8, verse 47, New International Version. On a still summer's night, the Holy Spirit descends. A campsite scattered with wooden cabins, surrounded by a whispering fringe of Australian natives. Amped down electric guitars, casting wistful chords from the windows of the community hall. Within, it's dark. Only the multicolored spots from a cheap disco light whirl over upturned faces. A forest of teenagers straining towards heaven. The youth pastor torrents with prayer. The hall swells with amens. The shadows imbue me with rare confidence. I raise my arms a little higher, my hands almost level with my shoulders, reaching for absolution, for communion. I beg to feel, like the others, what I am supposed to feel, or even a humble portion, just enough to be deserving. The girl in front of me has one arm high above her head. Her other hand is clutched to her chest. I know her. Not well, but we've both been in this church since we were toddlers. She's 2 years my junior. She sways harder, side to side. Her whole body starts to shake. A strange muttering flows from her lips. Just as she bends into a Z, 2 youth group leaders rush forwards and gently lower her to the floor. I see her mouth still moving frenetically with spiritual tongues. Her limbs twitch against the scratchy carpet. Her eyes are squeezed shut in her pale and glistening face. Her expression twisted in beatific passion, in virtuous and desired possession. I too yearned for this overwhelming consumption. It seemed to be granted to others, but not to me, and I wondered what I was lacking. I did everything the same as them. I'd attended Sunday services with my family since before I could even remember. I performed devotional time most days, reading the Bible, praying, journaling. I even dragged myself to Bible study fellowship, an evening class divided by age groups for the most Christianly of Christians. Therefore, the problem must be something internal, some intensity of faith I had yet to attain, a relinquishing of the ego I had yet to realize. My parents didn't grow up Christian. They converted in their university years and then joined our evangelical church shortly after migrating to Melbourne. The church was a newly established community. Most, like us, had moved to Australia in the 80s and 90s. Most, like us, were members of the Chinese diaspora who'd been in Malaysia or Singapore for several generations. For the first few years, church services were held in Box Hill, one of several suburbs in Melbourne's eastern corridor that would become a second home to ethnically Chinese migrant communities in the late 20th and early 21st century. I remember climbing a flight of narrow stairs, holding my mother's hand, to reach a musty chapel with white painted walls and orange carpets. Later, our church moved a couple of suburbs further east. This site was much bigger and seemed, to my childhood eyes, incredibly grand and hip. There were 3 separate parking lots. The auditorium had a brick baptism pool and a multi-tiered stage for a band and a grand piano. There was even a separate chapel and a nursery and lots of smaller rooms where they ran the kids' church. After the service, the congregation would squeeze into a tea room where the aunties spread out platters of homemade treats. Kueh lapis, its 9 jewel layers I would peel apart with my teeth. Kueh talam, sirimuka, and the blobby bright orange angku filled with mushy bean paste that none of us kids wanted. If we were lucky, there were curry puffs, piping hot and crispy from the oven. It was easy to get to the table first. Kids could weave and duck between the adults, who stood around in warm-breathed clumps, talking loudly in a blend of English and Cantonese about how their children were doing academically and which high school they were hoping to get them into, geographical zoning and scholarships and selection examinations. They would pray for one another's families, they assured each other. They would even put the children on the prayer list in the church bulletin. In the end, it was all in God's hands. All blessings sprang from heaven. You just had to have faith. Thank you.
Wonderful, Grace. Your description is so amazing that I am now hungry. Thank you. We now are going to have an exciting twist in our program with our next reader who's going to be reading from something different. Lisa Kröger holds a PhD in Gothic literature and is the author of Monster She Wrote and Toil and Trouble. She also co-hosts the No Fear and Monster She Wrote podcasts. Her work has won the Bram Stoker and Locus Awards. Lisa's fiction and nonfiction work may be seen in Lost Highways, Dark Fiction from the Road, Eco-Gothic, and Horror Literature Through History. Her edited essay collections include Shirley Jackson, Influences and Confluences, and The Ghostly and the Ghosted in Literature and Film. Lisa, take it away.
When I was approached to write the introduction to Unquiet Spirits, I had a myriad of emotions that kind of I went through. I was honored, obviously. I was extremely excited, especially once I read the book, because the essays are breathtaking. But I think I also worried that maybe I was the wrong person to write the introduction. I don't know if that was because I'm obviously not Asian, or if it was because I definitely still feel a great deal of imposter syndrome myself. But then I started thinking about where I was when I wrote Monster, She Wrote, which is my first book. And I was a woman writing really without a community. I had a small group of writer friends. Mostly I was writing by myself, as most writers do. And I often had people ask me why I wrote the things that I wrote, why I wrote about ghosts or the supernatural or horror. I was asked, why didn't I write something nicer? And I didn't know how to explain that my writing was how I experienced the world and how I expressed myself in the world and expressed my place. So I'm going to read from Monster, She Wrote. I'm going to read a little bit of the introduction. I think it fits really well, especially when you consider the other essays in this book, in Unquiet Spirits. Why are women great at writing horror fiction? Maybe because horror is a transgressive genre. It pushes readers to uncomfortable places where we aren't used to treading, and it forces us to confront what we naturally want to avoid. And women are accused of being transgressive all the time, or at the very least, they are used to stepping outside of the carefully drawn boundaries that society has set for them. Women are told what to do and who to be. Women are taught to be sweet, to raise children, to stay in their place. Women are pushed to the edges of society, where they are expected to keep their mouths shut and their heads down. The marginalization of women may have been more overt in the past, at times when women couldn't vote or own property or work outside the home, but it still happens today. Women are still instructed to be good girls. In any era, women have become accustomed to entering unfamiliar spaces, including territory that they have been told not to enter. When writing is an off-limits act, writing one's story becomes a form of rebellion and taking back power. Consider, for example, Margaret Cavendish, who in the 1600s brazenly wrote about science and philosophy, two subjects then considered the purview of men. More recently, Joel Gomez brought an African-American and lesbian perspective to the vampire tale, which had long been the province of European male protagonists. And today, we have the women of Unquiet Spirits subverting the so-called safe storytelling formats of the supernatural yarn, adding women's voices to these traditional narrative forms. For women especially, writing is often a kind of non-compliance. All of the writers that I researched for Monster, She Wrote, the writers in Unquiet Spirits, they're all rule breakers. Here's the funny thing. society doesn't always pay attention to what's happening over there on the edges. So while society wasn't looking, we were taking up our pens. While everyone else has been doing their own thing, women have been doing theirs, crafting tales about scientifically reanimated corpses, ghosts of aborted children, post-apocalyptic underground cities. So I guess what I'm saying is that I am reading a little bit of this introduction, and I've kind of dedicated this book to all of the misbehaving women who write in all of its nasty forms, horror and supernatural. And yeah, that's what I have.
That was perfect, Lisa. And it was a perfect fit with Unquiet Spirits and a magnificent fit for our Women in Horror Month. And I'm actually going to plagiarize you in a panel next week when they ask me about what I think about horror. I'm just going to, maybe I'll just play your recording and move my lips. I'll lip sync. Fantastic. Our next author, we're back to Unquiet Spirits. Celine Murray is a multi-award-winning author, editor, poet, and screenwriter from Ontario, New Zealand. A USA Today best-selling author, Shirley Jackson, and 4-time Bram Stoker Awards winner. She is an NZSA Honorary Literary Fellow and a Grimshaw Sargison Fellow. While Lee is reading, I will put up in the banner how you can find out more about her and follow her. In the meantime, go ahead, Lee, take it away.
Oh, Elaine, I think that's just so unfair making me go after Lisa, who kind of has written an iconic text for Women in Horror Month. So thank you, Lisa, and thank you for providing the forward and bearing witness to the essays in Unquiet Spirits, which really is really special to us. So I'm going to say the doyen of Unquiet Spirits, since I'm the editor-curator as well as an author. And it kind of came out of a chance meeting with our co-contributor, Genevieve Flynn, at a GenreCon convention, where 2 conscientious Asian girls turned up too early to a panel. And so we got talking about, hang on a minute, where are all the Asian women's narratives in horror? And we thought, well, there isn't one. So there's a gap. And having seen, recognized this Asian, tendency in each other, we said, well, we need to do something about it. And that gave rise to this beautiful book, Black Crane's Tales of Unquiet Women, which is where the unquiet comes from. And Lisa very kindly alluded to the fact that we are misbehaving women who are speaking out of turn. And that the reception to that collection was just incredible. So we went on to write Tortured Willows, Bent, Bowed, and Unbroken. This is poetry by Christina Singh, Angela Eureka Smith, myself, and Genevieve Flynn, who all appeared in Black Cranes. And because we had so much more to say on this topic, and then so poetry seemed another way to do it. And then, of course, Angela and I got talking. We should never get on a Zoom, Angela. If you're listening, we should never get on a Zoom again, because every time we do, we come up with some new project. And that gave rise to Unquiet Spirits. And of course, it's just been such an empowering, inspiring movement of incredibly talented and women with just wonderful, wonderful stories to tell in ways that we haven't heard before. So we were so delighted to be able to bring together so many incredible essays in Unquiet Spirits. And I knew that it was going to be wonderful. I already knew, because look at the women that we have in these pages, and yet it still blows me away. And now to hear, well, just ahead of us, ahead of me now, Kiyomi and Grace read their essays. I've read those essays multiple times, and I'm still getting frizzins listening to them read from their essays. So thank you, Elaine, for bringing us together today. I'm going to read from my essay from Unquiet Spirits. It's called displaced spirits, ghosts of the diaspora. And the reason I'm talking about this is because in New Zealand, Asian people came to New Zealand, or Chinese people came to basically work the gold fields and work the gum fields. And this was a concerted effort by New Zealand government and commerce to bring in labourers. But they didn't want Asian people to proliferate, so they brought in a very, very exorbitant poll tax, which basically kept a lot of women out. And one of the things that's really interesting about Chinese culture is this idea of ancestral worship. And if you don't bring a body back to their original homeland or to China, then on your death you become a hungry ghost. And because of the patriarchal nature of Asian cultures, at least in the past, certainly in the past, your woman's ghost automatically becomes a hungry ghost if her partner is a hungry ghost. So we just kind of follow the crowd. So if your husband is a hungry ghost and is displaced, then you become a hungry ghost. So basically, all of us in the New Zealand diaspora who are Asian become hungry ghosts. So that is the thesis of my story, and I've tried to relate it to myself. So here we go. Helps if I find it. Oops. Displaced spirits, ghosts of the diaspora. I am 6. It's Saturday morning and my dad is outside mowing the lawns, while in the kitchen, my Kiwi-born Chinese mum gathers 3 slender joss sticks into both hands and touches the bundle to the element on the stove. As always, I hope the bamboo sticks will crackle with little stars like sparklers, but instead their tips glow red and a curl of smoke drifts upwards on the air. Still holding the burning incense with 2 hands, Mum bows respectfully towards the open window, then places the sticks in a stand on the sill. She repeats the process twice more, fanning out the 9 sticks neatly on the holder. For the next half hour, the smoke wisps and swirls its way through the house, permeating everything with its scent of sandalwood and cinnamon. I breathe deeply, savouring the solemnity of this familiar ritual, quiet amid the general busyness of my childhood. Sometime later, when the sticks have burned out and there is no chance of my hair catching on the smouldering embers, I run my finger along the sill, tracing the letters of my name in the chalky pink ash. Sketching the double E's is especially satisfying. It's not until years later, when I'm in my teens, that I realise my mum, like her mother and her mother before her, is a kind of ghost whisperer. She's been sending daily communications to the spirits of our ancestors, messages of calm and courtesy delivered to the celestial realm on those captivating curls of silvery smoke. Because, just as it's respectful to phone your parents now and again to let them know how you're doing, for Chinese families, it's important to maintain regular contact with the dead to ensure they are nourished and entertained, to placate them. You see, if attracting the wrath of your parents is daunting, the misfortune brought on by disgruntled dead ancestors is something else altogether. Those disaffected souls risk becoming hungry ghosts. Among the best known of Asian spirits, hungry ghosts are typically depicted as bony-limbed creatures with scrawny necks and distended stomachs. Pitiful and emaciated, these disenfranchised souls scrabble on their hands and knees in the dirt, consumed by an unrelenting, unrequited hunger. Elliot de Bodard describes them in an excerpt from Golden Lilies in Asian Monsters. She writes, "The hunger grows in my belly and in my womb, gnawing at me piece by piece, stretching me dry and insubstantial once more." And Yangtze Chu describes them thus in her novel Ghost Bride. "I saw little more than dried skin and exposed bone, the eyes like shriveled fruits in deep sockets. his voice was thin and weak, as though there were not enough air to pump through that collapsed rib cage. In Chinese culture, people become hungry ghosts because of evil deeds carried out in the course of their lifetime. What constitutes an evil deed, however, is a matter of perception, with generations of patriarchy ensuring that women haven't fared well on that ledger. And here's an excerpt from Phoenix Claws, which is my story in Black Cranes. You must have angered the ancestors. My heart lurched. Ghosts? How? I don't know. They usually turn up after a woman has been greedy, don't they? The selfish wife who eats before her husband's guests. The woman who steals away the best portion of the meal for herself. That sort of thing. The realm of ghosts is full of greedy women who want more than their due. Women who hunger for acknowledgement, acceptance, and fulfillment. Now this excerpt from the poem Inheritance by Genevieve Flynn, which appears in Tortured Willows. Was that when you first began to swell? Your stomach bulging and burgeoning, swallowing the bitter, the burden, the second hands, the not for yous. Did your mouth begin to draw, closed like a miserly purse when you were left behind, your splendid mind with only hunger and no choice but to turn upon itself? Another cause of eternal ghostly torment is displacement. In this case, departed spirits are without a home nor the sustenance and companionship provided by their descendants. When you die far from your ancestral roots, you risk becoming a hungry ghost, alarming if we consider the extent of the Asian diaspora in recent centuries, people fleeing poverty and war, helped along by better transportation and Western demand for cheap labor. Imagine the explosion of hungry spirits that vast migration must have caused in the other world.
Thank you, Lee. That was wonderful. And thank you for providing the context of the other books and how Unquiet Spirits came about. That's such important background information. I really appreciate it. Now, last but certainly not least, Celine Murray is a queer disabled New Zealander with a multifaceted cultural background, including Chinese, Maori, and Scottish ancestry. A short fiction writer from a young age, she published her first collection, 7 to 17, at 17 years old. She's the winner of a Sir Julius Vogel Award for Science Fiction and Fantasy for her novella, Peach and Roxy. At university, Celine pursued her interest in linguistics and communication and now holds a Master's of Speech and Language Pathology. Though just beginning to dip her toes into the world of horror, Celine has a long-standing enthusiasm for death, with work experience in the death industry. She also enjoys embroidery, drinking tea, and playing board games with her partner. Celine, take it away.
Thank you. Firstly, I feel very lucky to have my essay included in Unquiet Spirits at all, alongside all the other wonderful essays in it. I was a late addition to the collection because my mother, Lee Murray, sent me her essay, as she often does, to give it a final edit. And her essay, as you've just heard, discussed the hungry ghost mythology and links that to our family history. And because it's a story about diaspora and displacement and how our family has changed over time, it includes some things that I had not known about our family, or even just little things that I hadn't thought of. I wasn't familiar with the Jostics and things like that. And so reading that essay inspired a lot of feelings in me, and I didn't know what to do with those. So I turned them into my own essay, which builds on a lot of the ideas that she included in hers. I chose the Huli Jing, the fox spirit, which is a creature that takes on the shape of other people, an element in its mythology that I relate to a lot as a person with mixed cultural heritage. I think that the fox spirit is a monster that has a lot to say about fitting in and the fear of being different and excluded and possibly even persecuted if you don't fit in, and the things that you have to do to be accepted into a community that might not be the one that you were originally from, or perhaps there isn't a community that encompasses everything that you're made up of. And I think that the fox spirit is a lot about wishing you could access more about who or even what you are. And so that's why I chose the fox spirit for my essay. I'm going to read from an excerpt from the start of my essay in Unquiet Spirits, which is called Fox Daughter. A few years ago, my partner and I visited Dunedin's Lanyuan Chinese Gardens, the only authentic Chinese garden in New Zealand and one of very few outside of China. The design of the garden is perfectly cultivated to reflect the harmony of nature, its winding paths offering glimpses of the landscape, each angle giving a new view of the trees, pagodas, river, and lake, an arranged beauty made of many facets that cannot be perceived all at once. Along the outer wall of Lanyuan is a corridor with information about the history of the Chinese community in New Zealand. Near the end of the corridor, a panel describes the ships sent to return the remains of dead miners to China, the loss of the SS Ventnor, and the souls she was meant to transport home. Their families left grieving an irreparable loss, predecessors of people just like me, a Chinese New Zealander on my mother's side. When I read about the SS Ventnor, a creature inside me snarled in pain. Then, this summer, when I visited my paternal grandmother, I asked her to tell me about our Maori lineage. She brought out a cardboard box filled with Scottish history, family trees, crests, tartan. Among the memorabilia were 2 photos and a slip of paper. The paper included the name of my iwi, my tribe, and a list of daughters and the Scotsmen they married. The first of the photos was a copy of the Charles Frederick Goldie painting of my ancestor Atama Paparangi, a famous Māori chieftain. The second was a minuscule photograph of the first mixed Māori Pākehā woman in our family, a new face of a woman who caused a metamorphosis in our history. She was the first step towards newness. I thought about her values, the knowledge she brought from her ancestors, and the cultural texture that never made it to me. In her eyes, I see a fox, a spirit that now lives in me, and we're angry, feral. We want retribution. Help! It's trapped in my ribcage. Jagged little teeth, needling claws, frenzied scrabbling and biting. It hurts me all the time. I want you to love it. The Huli Jing is a Chinese 9-tailed fox demon, a shapeshifter capable of appearing human, but often at a cost. In some forms, the fox must kill and consume human flesh. Others must search for human skulls to fit over the head before they can transform. Then there's an excerpt from The Ninth Tale by Rena Mason, which was published in Black Cranes. The fox spirit straightened the skull cap, moist with blood atop her head, then stepped over the decapitated corpse from which she'd taken it. Her hind paws transformed into petite human lotus feet, adorned in pointy shoes embroidered with golden silk. This visit, her name would be Juhua, like the chrysanthemums woven into the fabric near her toes. The 8 tails behind the fox spirit became long braids, winding themselves into intricate loops and circles, concealing the bone that aided her in keeping a human guise. Tottering on useless feet, Zhu couldn't roll the headless woman down the hillside. She kicked the body, wincing as pain ravaged the deformed foot and shot up her leg and into her torso. And then my essay continues. Fox demons are contradictory creatures, often malevolent and dangerous. However, they also contain the capacity to be good. Though she is a demon, the Huli Jing is a spirit who, through perseverance, might become a celestial being. This endeavor may take 100 or even 1,000 years to achieve, and may leave a trail of viscera and bone behind her. Thus, the essence of the fox demon is a painful yearning to be more than what they are. As a queer woman from Aotearoa with both Chinese and Māori heritage and an invisible disability, this absence of a complete identity claws at my heart. I am perpetually a minority, consistently faced with the threat of not enoughness, filled with an ever-present hunger for more of myself. Am I afraid of being a ghost, or jealous that they can disappear and I cannot? Thank you.
Thank you. I've always loved the fox spirit. I used to teach a monsters, a mythology course I taught for years at the university level. And I love seeing that monster through your lens, Celine. Wonderful, wonderful. We have a few minutes left. What I would like to do is bring our authors back on stage and go around in the order of the reading and just ask you if you have anything you would like to promote, anything coming up. If you don't have anything, in the spirit of Women in Horror Month, feel free to promote someone else. And Angela, I want you to type something in the comment box. I want you to tell us what you're promoting and I'll read it for you. So let me bring everybody back on. Kiyomi, you were first. Do you have anything you would like to promote, share with us, anything coming up?
Have to unmute there. No, not immediately. I am deeply entrenched right now in the writing process, and hope to have some new things to announce later in the year. But I'm very, very excited about all the news from my Unquiet sisters, who have several things that are up for various awards, including things that are going to be up for the StokerCon in June. And so go and vote for them, and best of luck to them.
Absolutely. Y'all are a prestigious group. Seriously. Grace, you were next. Would you like to share something with us? Anything you'd like to promote?
Oh, thank you. I think Lee already held up the cover to this earlier, but I am really excited about the new edition of Black Crane's Tales of Unquiet Women. I don't have it right next to me, but I think Lee does. Yeah. I think it's just beautiful. It's out now, I think, in hardcover and paperback, with a new cover illustration by Greg Chapman, which thematically does match with the original cover. And there's a new afterword as well. So yeah, shout out to our collection and all the stories in that. Yeah. The first book in this sort of, I guess, chain of unstoppable events. And yeah, I guess at the moment I'm just in the thick of still doing a bit of promo for my debut novel, which came out last year, and that is a science fiction novel called Every Version of You. It's been a very whirlwind and surreal experience to release this book into the world. So yeah, if you like the sound of staying in love and feeling real after mind uploading into virtual reality, then yeah, check it out. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for holding up the book again, Lee. Those are such gorgeous covers. And I love how all the books look so nice together, like just laid out together. They really are gorgeous. Lisa, what would you like to share with us?
Well, I absolutely encourage everyone to read Unquiet Spirits, of course, because it's just a wonderful, wonderful book. But I have my newest one, Toil and Trouble, which is a women's history of the occult. I consider it kind of a spiritual sequel to Monster, She Wrote. So I'm really excited for that. And then since this is Women in Horror Month, I'd like to kind of plug the podcast, the Monster, She Wrote podcast, which celebrates women in horror all year round. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you. And that's a gorgeous cover, too. What a great cover. Toil and Trouble. Wonderful. Lee, what would you like to plug?
Oh, thank you. Well, yes, nothing as exciting as Lisa's Toil and Trouble and Grace's Every Version of You, which are just, right out now and just shooting up all the awards lists. Lisa's Toil and Trouble is on the Bram Stoker Award list for nonfiction. So, doing very well and a wonderful addition to her Monster, She Wrote. And then Grace, Every Version of You is on a number of awards list already. So for a debut, that's just incredible. I'm waiting to hear what Kiyomi's got coming. I sort of like, that's a real teaser, isn't it? To say I'm writing. That's making me salivate, to be honest. But yes, Black Cranes, obviously, that's re-release is coming out, I think, on the 23rd of this month, so just a week away. But you can pre-order this now. And still available in paperback, and it has this wonderful new afterword by Nancy Holder, who is a Lifetime Achievement Award winner for horror. So wonderful essay by Nancy. It's a real addition to our piece of work. And then, of course, Unquiet Spirits, please pick up a copy of this and enjoy some of these wonderful essays. And what I've been working on, a film, actually, a Fox Spirit film, which goes into production tomorrow. It starts filming tomorrow, so exciting! I've barely slept, and it's a Kiwi Asian diaspora body horror, weird science kind of narrative. Basically, the Fox Spirit is the key to the key underlying mythology there. So really excited about that. I cannot wait to see what the team does with that. It's got Sasha Rainbow as the director. She's a BAFTA nominated director, so she's fabulous to work with. So I'm just kind of full of it. I'm absolutely full of it. So it's quite a new medium for me, and loving the experience, and just really excited to be able to bring another sort of type of Asian narrative into the world. So I'm really excited.
Great, thank you. Celine, would you like to share something?
Like I think my mum mentioned, I'm just dipping my toes back into this field recently, so I don't have anything that I can specifically point to that's coming up, but I am very excited about Unquiet Spirits, and surely anything that I do have come out in the future, you would be able to hear by following my mother anyway.
Oh God. I'm the tiger mother. Oh, dear.
Moms can't help it. They can't help it. And I'm trying to get Angela to give us something. Our sister, Angela Eureka Smith. I'm trying to have her. Okay. She's saying Duncan is an incubus too tired to perform, and Naomi is a witch with an itch in the middle of a midlife meltdown. That's exciting. Is that a book, Angela? Oh, her Kindle. Okay, Soft Deadlines. Okay. She does have her, a book coming out in Kindle Vella. She's also an editor, publisher, podcaster. I mean, Angela does it all. And she has been with us on both of these podcasts, both of these panels, supporting everybody, being a wonderful sister that she is to all of us. So I really, really appreciate it. I really greatly appreciate her. And I certainly appreciate all of you taking your time, sharing with us, especially when what you're sharing is just so intimate and personal, and these vulnerable stories. It's very brave. I can't say enough about Unquiet Spirits. I loved it. And I really recommend that everybody put it on their bookshelf. It is an important work. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'm going to end this broadcast, and it will be available as a recording later.